Winters on the front lines during the World Wars were not only battles against the enemy, but battles against the cold itself. Soldiers faced temperatures near or below 20 degrees Fahrenheit, with frozen ground beneath them and icy winds cutting through their trenches. Sleep, essential for survival, became one of the hardest things to achieve. Yet men developed harsh, ingenious and often desperate methods to endure the night. These were not luxuries or comforts, but brutal tricks of survival passed along among soldiers. Here are 10 of the most effective and little-discussed ways soldiers managed to rest when every hour in the cold was a fight to stay alive. The dry layer principle. Uniforms soaked in rain or snow were a death sentence if worn through the night. Soldiers learned to keep one dry piece of clothing, sometimes a shirt, socks or even strips of sackcloth, reserved for sleep. Changing into something dry before lying down was often the difference between conserving body heat or succumbing to frostbite. This technique, though simple, was one of the most essential survival rules in the trenches. Rotational sleeping. In the trenches, not every man could rest at once. Beyond the need for vigilance, there was a survival benefit. Rotating sleep in small groups allowed men to huddle tighter together in shifts. A compact cluster of bodies generated far more warmth than a scattered group. Sleep was short and uncomfortable, but this method ensured some warmth circulated among the men and helped stave off hypothermia. Dugout niches in the trench walls. The floor of the trench was often a swamp of icy mud. Sleeping directly on it was impossible. Soldiers carved small alcoves into trench walls, stuffing them with straw, spare sandbags or rags. These cramped niches insulated against the wind above and the frozen earth below, creating a pocket of warmth where a man could curl up. Many memoirs describe these dugouts as life-saving shelters, despite being barely large enough to lie inside. Shared blankets and close huddling, that's what it often came down to. You see, a single blanket in open cold was nearly useless, but 2 or 3 men wrapped tightly together under one blanket stood a chance. By sleeping back to back, or, in circles, soldiers could really maximize both the meagre insulation of the fabric and their collective body heat. German and Russian soldiers particularly relied on this tactic during winters when supplies were low. It wasn't comfortable, not by a long shot, but it saved lives. Straw, hay and improvised bedding, these were absolute lifelines. Elevation off the frozen ground was critical, honestly. Soldiers used any dry organic matter they could find. Straw from barns, hay from abandoned farms, reeds, or even dead leaves. Spread beneath their bodies, these materials provided a buffer against the cold earth. Straw was often infested with lice, but, soldiers accepted the itching as preferable to freezing through the night. In extreme cold, some even stuffed straw directly into their clothing for insulation. Boot and sock rotation was, believe it or not, a matter of survival. Cold feet were among the greatest threats in winter trenches. Soldiers practiced tricks such as loosening boots at night to restore circulation or stuffing them with straw or rags to retain heat. Damp socks were often tucked inside tunics to dry against body heat, then swapped out during the night. Boots themselves were sometimes kept under the soldier's head or chest to prevent them from freezing stiff. These routines determined whether a soldier woke with intact feet or suffered frostbite. Heat without fire. Stones and bottles. Open flames in trenches risked drawing enemy fire, so instead soldiers relied on stored heat. Stones or metal canisters were heated over fires behind the lines, wrapped in cloth and carried back to dugouts. Empty bottles filled with hot water served the same purpose. Once slipped under blankets or pressed against the body, they released warmth for hours, offering rare, deep sleep on otherwise frozen nights. Building sleeping platforms. Where materials allowed, soldiers constructed raised sleeping platforms out of planks, sandbags or branches. Even just a few inches above the trench floor meant less exposure to rising damp and biting cold. Some units reinforced these platforms with mud walls to block wind, turning them into primitive but effective bunk beds within the trench. The watchman's warmth method. Some soldiers deliberately delayed sleep until their bodies were fully exhausted and warm from movement. By pacing, exercising lightly, or stamping feet for circulation, they raised core body temperature before collapsing into whatever bedding was available. This method allowed them to fall asleep faster and hold body warmth longer, even in short bursts. It was honestly a psychological as much as a physical trick, since falling asleep cold was often a quick path to hypothermia. You know, perhaps the most overlooked survival trick was mental. Soldiers taught themselves to conserve energy, remain still, and condition their minds to rest, even with the cold gnawing at them. Many adopted nightly rituals, maybe smoking a final cigarette, whispering prayers, or just recalling warm memories of home to push through the discomfort. Exhaustion helped, sure, but routine kept men sane and gave them the strength to face another frozen night. Each of these 10 tricks was born not out of comfort but necessity. The 20-degree trenches of Europe claimed lives daily, not only through bullets but through frostbite, exposure and exhaustion. Yet the ingenuity of these soldiers, whether carving niches, sharing blankets, stuffing boots with straw or heating stones, allowed them to endure. The story of trench warfare is not only about combat, it is also about the human struggle to rest and survive in conditions few today can imagine. The frozen trenches of war tested endurance in ways that go beyond strategy or firepower. Sleeping in 20-degree conditions forced soldiers to innovate with every scrap of material and every ounce of determination. These brutal tricks remind us that survival is often about the smallest, harshest choices made in the darkest hours. If this exploration gave you a deeper look at the realities soldiers faced, subscribe to In the Beginning for more forgotten wartime survival methods and overlooked history. Share this with others who value the raw human side of history and help keep these stories alive.